So welcome everybody to the Augmented Society Network. This is the thematic network via the Royal Society of Arts, Manufacture and Commerce in the UK. It's a nearly 300-year-old organisation that is branching out globally. The Augmented Society Network is one of the pieces in place in the United States to engage in great conversation and networking. So welcome everybody to the Augmented Society Network. This month's conversation is entitled Virtually There or There Virtually. Are we still waiting for the virtual world? Virtual, augmented and mixed reality worlds are coming, but progress is truly incremental. If virtual is meant to augment our lives positively, what are we actually looking for? What are the deeper issues and what have we been missing all along? It's only been about 2,350 years since Aristotle discovered that the world was in fact round, but only 50-ish years since the American computer scientist Ivan Sutherland described the digital 3D equivalent. When will humanity engage deeper than our flat, screen-based digital experience and live within these incredible and promising other worlds? Or are we not already doing so without recognizing it? So today we're going to be discussing what looks good in the virtual reality world, how we can be truly augmentative. So we're not discussing just virtual reality, for example, as a technology. We're looking more widely at the impact of it. We're looking at areas that are ripe for development, and we're also looking at codes of conduct and behavior in a virtual setting. Now, those are just guides to what we might discuss. Sometimes we discuss entirely other things. Please also be aware that we have the chat window into which you can put questions, which I will then field into the conversation. So I'd like to kick the conversation off. Jonathan, you work in the entertainment and virtual reality space, and you are involved in immersive experiences and have a lot of information about that. Would you be willing to kind of get us going on what you see as good in augmented or virtual spaces? No pressure.
It's funny because you like good is relative, right? And I hope everybody can hear okay. There's a lot of ambient noise around me, but I find it interesting when with presenting the thought of the world being round, which we see unfortunately more and more questioning of, yet we've always been looking at the world in the digital realm through flat panels, whether it's our computer monitor or our mobile phones, or even if we're talking about goggles, it's still, we're true 3D, we've not attained it yet, or really feeling that we're in these places. I've always been of the feeling that we are where we are. We know things are developing quickly. We just have to grasp what we can and enjoy it, knowing that more stuff is coming. And you talk about entertainment. Yes, I have been in entertainment a long time, and there's a lot of question about whether storytellers will even allow there to be a true virtual experience where people can choose their own destiny within that virtual realm, because then the storyteller is removed from that. We've gotten a little bit closer with things like Xbox games, or the very high definition games with narrative and the dimensionality. And interestingly, when I was working on Avatar back in 2000, end of 2009, 2010, which is an eon ago technology-wise, we found that backlash to the movie was depression, that people weren't able to visit Pandora. So from that experience, they had a visceral connection to the location and were so deeply distraught that they would never be able to visit there. It was a cool bit of information, because then we started creating some interactives that approximated being there as best we could. But still, it's, again, when you talk about the good, where's the good? I feel like we're dealing with Pandora's box. Like there's good, just on the other side of good is evil. I then open it up to, from that, again, my feeling of we don't need to have the major goggles and spaces with all these sensors and everything to have that true virtual experience. and what entails now? What can we grasp onto now that conveys that virtual experience? What are we looking for from the virtual experience?
You touched there on good and evil. Ethan, you might be interested is in terms of how you bring people together for the good, for the coaching aspect of this, and the use in the very early days, for example, of Second Life to enable people to get together and talk, but also the advent of adult virtual reality. As part of the BBC's 100 Women series, a woman in Los Angeles was interviewed about that space and how rights were being impinged in that arena. Now, I'm not going to go into that in too much detail, but I've already seen both good and evil. I wonder how we work with that. Ethan, what is it you're actually looking for?
Yeah, really fascinating. It's really, really interesting to me. I'm an executive coach, and the thing that's really interesting to me is the place of this augmented world, this virtual reality in coaching for the future, because of the way that people are operating in a much faster paced sort of way, and we often can't get that face-to-face contact with coaches that need the coaching and development and behavioural change. We often coach over the phone or Zoom, or, in different ways, so virtually. And I just think it would be really interesting to create a space that was a safe environment to explore in with the coachee. My only, and touching on that good and bad piece, my only reservation is, will it then reduce the emotive side, the human contact? And is that a good thing or a bad thing in coaching? I think it's the future, so you've kind of got to go with it. That's the kind of debate, I guess, I'm having in my head, and I was hoping to gain some more insight.
And interestingly, our next January will be about what's community? What does it mean for the sense of self? So, I think some key questions there to answer.
And interesting, the connection that Jonathan just made with mental health as well. Coaching is often seen as a preventative rather than a cure. People could have coaching if they chose to sort of address issues before it becomes too big and they go off with stress, for example, in the workplace. Jonathan just mentioned the Pandora's box. It's quite interesting how with Avatar, people couldn't get there. They wanted that amazing nirvana sort of space to be in. I think that's quite an interesting concept as well.
Ethan, if I can dig deeper into what you were talking about, what do you think you're lacking when using, whether it's Zoom or Skype or what have you? What do you think you're lacking in terms of that connection that's required for the work you do?
I think, just as a knee-jerk reaction, it's that three-dimensional bit. It's like you said at the beginning, it's the flat space on the screen, and I can't quite get into a room with someone, if that makes sense, and actually walk around it and explore with the individual in a kind of environment that I want to set up that is comfortable and safe for them. So I don't know if that helps explain. I mean, I haven't sort of had first-hand experience of it. This is something quite new to me, so that's how I sort of envisage it anyway.
It's funny. It's almost like the space between is required. And I know Zoe hates silence, but there's something connecting in silence. Just like I imagine there's something connecting in space between us.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it is that how Jonathan and I have spoken about it as well. How do you actually have that emotional connection? And I think for me, I'm just bored of looking at a monitor, and that's my life now because I work online, I live online, but really, is that it? And I think what you're saying there, Ethan, is, there with haptic or with other technologies, this has to be more at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other fascinating piece is around identity, and sometimes you can create who you want to be through an avatar of some kind, in that environment, and kind of live it. Coaching is all about the future and putting somebody in that position with like a magic wand. How do they want to craft their future? How do they envision themselves? And you could actually play that out in a virtual world. So that's the other piece which really fascinates me, with linking to identity as well.
I'll be quiet shortly, but I actually made a realistic avatar of myself rather than the one I wanted.
Oh, right.
It enabled me to put body weight, glasses, my love of knitwear, all of that. And then I looked at myself and how I felt what I was doing now against what I was doing 20 years ago, where I was probably some sort of creature. It's quite depressing, actually.
Amazing.
It's really interesting that you say that, because I tried with the Samsung Galaxy S10 that came out, and they were coming up with the emoticons or whatever the equivalent was to iPhone's product, and I was frustrated because I couldn't make it true enough. There was nothing that had the real thinning hair. I had to have a full head of hair, and I'm like, that's not me. And and then we go again back in 2007, entertainment, where I built a product. It was the create your own avatar in the Simpsons world, and we had so much choice of eyes, like hundreds of eyes that you could choose, hundreds of hairstyles, all that type of stuff. And now it feels like we have less choice, because to that point of what is that thing that we're putting forward, and did the creators of these products believe, you know what, I don't need to make it real, because people are never going to choose the real. They're not going to choose the slovenly versions of themselves. Maybe that's a major assumption, but that's what sort of seems to be happening.
Yeah, it's people coming to terms with the reality, isn't it? And like you say, there's a kind of fakeness to it, and it's that post-truth world that we live in, and then you kind of get into bigger themes. but yeah, that's for sure.
Alec, what's your thinking at the moment? How does this impact in your life or your career?
What I was thinking is that, I work in the aerospace industry. I look after creating virtual reality applications and augmented reality applications as well, to use like in the field, for the maintenance of airplanes and factory environment. And I see a lot of people seeing virtual reality as an isolated experience, like something you do on your own. A lot of it has to do with virtual reality training, so learning something. I've seen like demo you can do, like of some companies where you can actually put together a vacuum cleaner, and you learn how to do it in a virtual reality, but there's no social element to it. So and everything we do, I'm an engineer, so in engineering it's done by teamwork, and a lot of people see virtual reality, maybe not so much the augmented reality, but the virtual reality as something that you do on your own, and eliminates the social team that really limits the spectrum of applications of things you can do. If you think of virtual reality as something you do on your own, even a training, it should be social, not really like you and the virtual objects and you do it on your own.
Right, so you're operating in a kind of you-only environment, and what you're looking for there is similar to what Ethan is saying. He's actually looking at it now as a really meaningful way to connect to other people, to get away from the flat experience.
Yes, and also like this should potentially replace, go a step beyond the telepresence and all of that, and so that meetings and activities could really be done. Like I deal often with teams that are displaced all around the world, and we don't have yet a virtual reality environment where we can all sit and meet and have a meeting, even if it's all around sitting a virtual table and talk about things. We still need to have like clunky WebEx sort of things that never work very well, and I see people like in offices, they do have virtual reality headsets and all that, but it's still like, okay, one person creates like an amazing 3D model, but then to share it and then to download it, send it to somebody, which will load on their virtual reality headset and see it. We do have like immersive caves and rooms that create a sort of holographic environment, but it's still very limited, and it's like 8 people sitting in one room in one country, and 8 people sitting in another room the other. So it's a big screen experience more than a real immersive experience.
I'm sorry. I think what blows my mind is the amount of computing that is required to pull off what we're talking about. The experiences that we've seen usually so far in that virtual space, our world is extremely limited. There's only so many steps we can take. And I know Zoe and I have had the conversation and fallen in the rabbit hole about what really is needed to get to that virtual world that we're talking about, where you could go anywhere and have a relationship with anyone or anything, and it'll respond in the way that is logical, the way we are as humans. So much of it, Alex, to what you were saying, it's very limited into what your response is going to be. because of the computing power that's required. There's a space here in Los Angeles that is really cool. They've done a really nice job of taking you through set environments where you have some choice in terms of where you look and how you might interact with objects, but still, it's a very defined positioning of the person and the response that the person gets. So you still feel confined by the playing field that you're put in. I just feel that we're far away from the Star Trek holodeck. Alex, I can't wait for the time that we can go in and actually touch stuff in virtual realms to figure out how to fix things in the real world. And I know that there's small examples of that, but when it really becomes a practice, I just question how much computing power do we need to get there.
Sometimes I feel that the computing power is not really the limit. It's more like the people's imagination and the education, meaning that the people see that as a niche technology and they don't really see the benefit. So how we can get people to embrace it, because it's only at the moment, even in a company like mine with 100,000 engineers or tech people, it's still seen as something for geeks. That's very odd. You know, it should be all our like bread and butter, isn't it? Or you know, it should be really like at least out of 100,000 people, at least 10,000 should embrace it. It says only a few hundreds.
So what will be the trigger? What will make that happen?
But hold on a second, before we answer that question, remember, I don't want to date myself, but when there was the Apple IIe, I was a geek. And now if you don't have a computer, that's the true minority. So, or some type of computer, whether it's a laptop, desktop, or a mobile device. So I think that we'll get there. It's what I'm not disagreeing with you, Alex. It's really compelling question of what comes first, the chicken or the egg.
Yeah, I agree. It's a matter of time. But maybe also that these experiences don't give enough to get people on board. It's like, what can you do? The question that we had earlier, what can you do with that you cannot do with a screen? So it's a little bit of, so you really need to give something extra that people need. And a lot to do of my work has to do with use cases, so that you prepare the use cases so you can get funding for a specific application. And if the use case, a lot of these use cases, people want to do amazing things in virtual reality, but they fall because people say, oh, you can do that on a screen, and then you never get the funding to do what you want, because I don't know, maybe it's my limited experience. There's just a few of these applications are really immersive, like you are within the wing of an aircraft and you explore places that you could not really explore in person. Other than that, it's difficult to see like the advantage. Like just say they explaining the use cases, make sure to get the necessary funding to do something interesting. It's quite challenging.
So going back to what's the trigger? How much? I mean, a lot of good things come from the private sector, an awful lot, obviously. Some things are government led. Where is the urge or the drive to take us beyond the flat screen? Or is that just something no one's even questioning? I'm just utterly stunned that we're all still okay. Obviously, we need to define the use case, Alex, to pull people in. But there are some extraordinary events beginning to happen. We were looking at Marshmello on Fortnite, played to 10 million people for a 10-minute concert. Some people were in a virtual reality space and were avatars or guests, if you like. Other people were looking at it from a flat screen perspective. But it seemed to me just such an exciting thing that created the fear of missing out, the need to be there. And these little pockets are tremendously valuable and are beginning to happen. So how does that then become more widespread? Wayne, any thoughts?
Well, first, let me say I'm kind of shocked that we haven't moved further with 3D, because I started with 3D back in the early 80s, right out of high school, where I took drafting at a technical school. I worked for Raytheon Missile Division, and I built 3D missile parts on these big mainframe computers that took up, massive rooms. And now we can basically scan our faces in 3D on our phones. So I think the computing power is definitely there. It's the application of 3D and virtual reality or augmented reality, whatever you want to put it into, but it's all about using 3D objects. We've pretty much got the content creation down. There's many, many tools. I used to work for Autodesk. You know, they're pretty much the leader in 3D content creation, or at least one of them. You know, we've got that down, the content creation part. One of the best applications that I've seen that I think is probably going to be more used in the future is on the America's Got Talent show. This company came out, and it really wasn't a talent, but they presented it anyway. And they had this green screen kind of environment and 3D goggles or virtual reality goggles that they put on Howie. And they made him walk out on a rope that was going across a gorge because there was a guy, you know, that was hanging on for his life. They made him reach down and grab this guy by the hand. And if you know Howie Mandel, he doesn't touch anyone. So they put him in a situation in virtual reality which made him reach out and touch another person, you know.
So he actually touched this virtual body.
No, he touched a real person because there was a guy laying down with a green screen outfit on, and his hand was exposed. And in virtual reality, he thought he was just reaching out to touch a virtual reality person. But in reality, it was a real guy down there with his hand.
I sort of take issue with the fact that, or the feeling that content-wise we're already there. Because one of my biggest frustrations is when you see somebody using the pieces, the components, like Wayne, I agree, there's a lot of 3D that we've nailed in a very simple way that's effective. Like the 3D mapping of faces, like doing augmented reality, using mobile apps, etc. The ability to actually use that the right way, I find that there's so many that put out content that does it, I don't want to say half-assed because I want to trust that they're doing the best job possible that they can do. But then the fear I have is that people say, pshaw, I don't want to do that anymore. I could use this, and we've talked about this before on this plat, like within ASN. It's easier for me just to use the low-tech or the lo-fi than to wait and get all this accoutrement for this heavy stuff. So that's, to be brutally honest, that's my fear with all of this stuff. The stuff that's not up to par, or the stuff that's not presented as this is iterative, we have a long way to go, or even worse is the stuff that gets so much press as this is it, when it's so surely not.
I was wondering about something like Bashir's Dream by Angel Soto. It's the story of a 14-year-old Syrian refugee in Jordan. And it's an incredibly moving and immersive experience of somebody in deep trouble in a war zone, and it's incredibly compelling. And there are other examples in healthcare, for example, where a patient who's in pain has their attention diverted. Some of the things that maybe get some press, but not a great deal of press. But I think what we're currently looking at is these little pockets of incredible experiences. And I would love for the whole world to be digitized in some way, but I know that's so far off. And is it even desirable? I'm not really sure. What do you all think about putting you into a war zone, enabling you to experience less pain, some of the more pertinent or poignant experiences that we can create?
Yeah, I think the opportunities are limitless. It's, you know, it's only your imagination, and it very exciting. It excites me. Just, you know, your two examples there, especially now in the climate emergency that we're in globally. And I think, you know, there's a huge sort of travel application there, you know, to have sort of virtual meetings so that you don't never have to fly again, that kind of thing. You know, that is, you know, completely changing the global scene, and it's so powerful.
In the realm of Elon Musk, we mess up our real world so badly that we live not on Mars but in our virtual. I mean, obviously it's a well-told story in science fiction. But
yeah, it's not just Musk, it's Total Recall, it's a whole bunch of movies.
Yeah, it's the whole, you know, is that actually still on the cards? Is that what's really going to happen?
That's a tough one.
There's
I can
there's
see it
the good and evil,
happening.
right? There's
It's
the bad.
frightening. Yeah, that's the evil. Yeah.
But here's another thing. When you talked about being in a war zone or being where you're not in pain or something like that, and to be able to not be in pain for those who are, as I'm here in a hospital, is a really interesting component, because there's a lot more work than just putting goggles on and being in a different place. When you're looking at one thing that needs to be done in this world is to be bringing us together and show hopefully how similar we are. And maybe this is me being too altruistic, but I see that there's a huge opportunity. Zoe and I wrote something that's going to be in Pakistan published in Pakistan, that's about this very same topic. But I looked at the publisher that is publishing this, and they had put up some tweets about travels through Pakistan. And there was a lot of stuff that was just of nature, and it looked beautiful and all. But the most compelling stuff that was tweeted was video of people in space, people in the space. Then you realize, wait a second, they're in Pakistan, completely far away. In the West, we think of different as danger, as whatever. The reality is they're just like us. So there was one that was really compelling where they're out in the wilderness somewhere and they're barbecuing, and there's a guy that has it's a traditional Pakistani instrument, but it could as well just be a guitar, or it could be a hi-fi that they're listening to. And being able to utilize video through Twitter gave that visceral experience, that connected experience, that piece that broke down the walls, that I think is a true win in virtual reality. If it's not a matter of us just breaking off from the world we live in to have some quote unquote perfect realm, if there's a way for us to connect better, and which goes back, I guess, to the point we were saying that Ethan was bringing up earlier, being able to be in a room, or Alex, being in a room that you're sitting comfortably in a chair and the person you're talking to is right next to you or across the table, as opposed to just in a flat screen. I don't know if we even need that.
Which was Ivan Sullivan's view, and he described it back in '65 as a room in which everything was real, which is, I think, what you've just described, and that was 50 years ago or so. But it's that connection to people that you feel it's not about going into virtual reality and being there on your own, or having to forge a relationship with someone you don't know, or is it that?
Well, even with the Fortnite example, the thing that I found most breathtaking about that was in the let's call 7th minute of Marshmello's set, the music breaks into some amazing, mind-blowing beat or drop beat or whatever you want to call it, and all of a sudden they turned off the gravity within Fortnite. So all of a sudden everybody is floating. So the elation that was caused communally, because you see everybody else sort of floating and bouncing around with you. If anybody here's been to a rave, it's that feeling. Like, I thought that I was back in a rave purely because of that. It was that group exhilaration. It wasn't just me having a cool moment. It was all of us together having a cool moment.
That's extraordinary.
That sounds amazing. Wish I was there.
Well, that fear of missing out is a well-known technique, isn't it? Well, I feel like I've missed something, but it's something that perhaps others understand much better than I do. Am I in the generation that's a little late for this? Why are we talking about it? Why aren't we immersed in it and doing it? Should I just swap my career now from kind of internet consultant to VR experience generator? I've just in Vegas here, there are, and across the world really, there are more and more immersive experiences. They contain real objects, but really a lot of them are about taking selfies. So there's the selfie museum here. So you can get all of your out there experiences in one place.
Yeah, so funnily enough, I was with a consultant the other day who's doing a new social platform which is about the UN Sustainable Development Goals and about giving back and making an impact and having purpose in what you do. And he actually used a little thing about, we've been in the era of the selfie, the real obsession about the self, and now it's all about other. And it was kind of relating to what was just said, in terms of a connected world. I really feel quite passionately that it is now kind of got bored with ourselves and that sort of self-obsession, and it's about community, like you mentioned at the beginning, and getting the system of the globe working and functioning. And
I think that's a lovely way of putting it as well. We're bored with ourselves.
Yeah. And that's what occurred to me when Jonathan was just saying, despite all the bombardment and all the chaos and all the noise we get through our social media channels and, you know, various information throughout the day, it seems like we want something more. And we want this immersion. We want this other new thing that, because we've kind of, I don't know, are we exhausted? Are our senses exhausted and we need a new sensory way of overloading and going in that rave space? You know, it's just brings that up for me. I don't know what you guys think.
Oh, for sure. I think it's definitely experiencing something that you can't in real life, or being someone that you can't be in real life. Look at the porn world. You know, they are probably doing crazy things with VR. I haven't personally experienced it. I'm sure they are, because they're always on the front edge of technology. And the other thought that came to my mind, you know, being a photographer, I always, you know, capture people, mainly faces. And a lot of everyone I talk to, they don't like themselves. They hate having their photos taken. They don't like their picture. I think just looking at the technologies that exist now, the next phase of Snapchat type applications, and they're already kind of doing it, will be to make the face that you want to have be your avatar and map it onto your face or your body and go into an environment and be someone else. Because it's real easy to do nowadays with the technology, is to just map whatever face or body you want onto yourself and go into that environment and be with some porn star or be cool and hip that you're not in real life.
So what does that do in the realm of trust? Are we collectively going to say, I'm okay without suspending my disbelief, which is a trait or a trick in entertainment? Am I going to do that with everything I do now? Because just like with dating sites where you're not really sure if that photo is from last week, that's scary to me that we're not going to be able to be. We always say the more that technology grows, the more it's going to force us to be human or real. And the more we go into virtual reality, I almost feel like to hold on to our sanity, we've got to be more real. And if we're going to lose that, then I personally, this is just a personal thing, I don't know if I'm game for that. I don't know if I want to go into a place that I can't trust. I already have enough problems right now trusting what I read, let alone seeing faces or anything.
I think it's only going to get worse.
So another thing for you to concern yourselves with then is why I have a digital self, which is now working in a virtual reality world. I earn money from what that virtual person does. Do I mind what happens to my virtual self during the time at which I am virtually at work? Do I just take the money and let my virtual self be used in whatever way whoever it is that logs in wants to use it? Do I care about me?
Because if it's bringing you revenue, then you would care. You say, I mean, seriously, but you say like, oh, my virtual self is bringing in money, so therefore it's a business. So if you didn't care, and if you wanted it to be like Tay, who starts saying that Adolf Hitler was right, that you don't want your virtual self to get pushed to that point, because then it's not worth anything to you. So you are going to care. And it's funny because you go back to the first thing we talked about before we started recording, talking about the football clubs that we're fans of. So you're West Ham, Ethan is Liverpool, I'm Arsenal, Alex and Wayne, I'm not sure who you root for. But for me, that's another team that I have to invest in. So there's the college football team that I invest in. There's the NFL team that I invest in. There's the MLB, like all these teams that I have to worry about. The more personas that we have, that's more stuff that we've got to manage. And that would drive me crazy.
And believing what's real or not, because obviously some of the wrestling side of things, that's all fantasy as well, playing, you know, what is actually real. How many times has Arsenal, you know, accidentally missed a goal or something? How do we determine what's really real in what's real now? So we're coming towards the end, but something I did want to look at, and I think Ethan, you were saying, you know, people, we're bored with ourselves. Sometimes when we get bored, we do things that we wouldn't do otherwise. And I'm wondering about the things we would do in the virtual world for which there are no laws. I could go online and just continually kill Jonathan every time I come across him in the virtual space, bash him on the head, and then we log back in again and I come in and I do it. Who wants to stop me from doing that? Because it's what I feel I want to do.
Thank you very much.
The question is about codes of conduct. Such a wild west. What are we thinking?
Did you see Westworld,
Yes.
on TV? Yeah, I mean, it's a bit like that, like, you know, a theme park where you can do what you want and, you know, have sex, get drunk, do whatever you want all the time and kill people is what part of it. But I guess it depends to what extent. You know, in my mind, I guess I'm slightly a little bit more reserved in that. You know, I would see if there was some sort of avatar of myself as an extension of me, and I'd want to control it in that way that I felt I would act in a proper way and have the behaviours that I would be comfortable in real life. So I guess it depends what layer of control you want.
Facebook are launching, is it called Horizon? I can't remember.
Yeah.
A brand new virtual world. And people who join it are called citizens. And there is a code of conduct that you have to agree to before you can enter into that world.
Is the flag, does it have a hammer and sickle? Just wondering. Citizens.
This is, yeah, it's not people, it's citizens. What does that imply straight away? Why are we just so easily interchanging these kinds of words to imply, you know, you've now got to do what you're told? But there is a code of conduct in there, but it's a fun space. It's a place, well, as to start with, for just, you know, meetups and discussions, but that's going to turn at some point.
It's interesting because you bring up definitions. What are the meanings of words, and how we could even have an argument or a long dissertation on what the meaning of virtual is. And I think that's part of our challenge too, is being open to the multiple definitions, know what we're getting into with each of those versions of virtual, and know that something, I hope, is coming that is going to answer these Westworld things. We're also bringing in the background that we have of playing games. I was just playing Microsoft Xbox with my son. We were playing Lego Marvel. My Iron Man died a lot more times than he did in the Avengers series of films. We're so used to, in gaming, dying and coming back. Are we going to be in that same realm where, so my virtual world, I died, I came back, hell, Minecraft, my kids play all the time. Oh, I'll just die and let me come back where you are. It's an interesting concept that as we're talking about virtual and what is our self virtually.
So we are actually nearing the end, as I said. What I'd like to do just to finish up is to ask each of you where you see the most exciting development or application of virtual reality. Alex, could we start with you?
Well, I probably should give it some thought. I mean, I said before, there's endless possibilities, and really about the fact that what is the real self? I think it's just an extension. I meet a lot of people in real life, not real, that they wear a mask when they talk to me, especially in the corporate environment. I hardly meet a real person these days. So a virtual avatar is just an extension of that. It's like, you show what you want to show of yourself, or you show something else that is not really yourself. So in terms of what would be the enable people to collaborate and do things that they could not do in real life, not just like have a person that is too lazy to go to a shopping mall, go to a virtual one, but allow people to gather together. Let's say I'm set in 2 weeks time for a team booster, going with my team in the mountains and do stuff. Why not involving people and doing like a virtual one, and then get people from all over the world to participate, the extended group. So I think it's going to open possibility, because you could have a colleague that is in the hospital, but he can still attend in a virtual form, and enabling people that could not participate before to and share the richness of the human interaction, and that cannot be done through a screen. It needs to be done in a more immersive environment. So
Wayne,
I would like to see, since I'm not a gamer and I'm not into that world, I would like to see more of a Google Glasses with an augmented reality productivity interface type, solution. So I'm not just at my keyboard sitting in front of a flat screen. I could have my glasses on. I could be reaching up like you see in the movies, them sliding things left and right and having whatever I need in my augmented environment.
Ethan?
Yeah, I mean, similar to that, I imagine putting glasses on and using it in a sort of educational setting. As I said, my area is coaching, and to actually engage with someone and see their posture and see their behaviors and their expression and, the way they're breathing in a kind of virtual space is really exciting for me, which gets, as you just said, beyond the flat pane. The other side of it is the use of imagery and kind of being able to see the realities of somebody else. Sometimes people struggle with communication and describing, and if they could somehow construct in a mutual space to really get across what they're trying to say, in their more visual dreams, then that again is just, that would be mind blowing in my space. So I hope it happens.
I'm going to go a different direction. Again, play with the definition of virtual reality. I actually put together a panel for LA Comic-Con a few years ago dealing with IP in theme park or virtual spaces. So I had people that had built theme park rides, and there was one guy that had done a bunch of Disney park rides plus a bunch of Universal high impact, high velocity rides. And he had just completed, or maybe not just, but had completed something for the Navy where for their basic training, they have them go on this scale ship and using those same types of things like fire and water and whatever you would find in a theme park where there's no real jeopardy. The people in a theme park aren't going to get wet for the most part or be close to fire. But certainly if you're in a ship that's having troubles, you might be close to that. So now there's an entire ship that as part of basic training, graduation from basic training, you have to survive this ship. And that to me is really compelling. It's really expensive. So I don't know how we'll be able to pull that off. But again, if we're opening up our mind to what virtual reality can be and not just a digital format, a purely digital format, I think that there's something that's really cool and really moving and really visceral and something that you could take with you that is really fascinating and exciting to me.
I'm not entirely sure, but I would love for there to be an entirely accurate version of the entire world that I could walk in rather than small individual spaces. I love the idea of ontologies, taxonomies. I love explaining things, and I'm fascinated as to how that can be used to create the world as we know it now. I'm not sure that I know it, but I'd like the whole world. So I'm going to finish up there. Thank you very much for an expansive conversation, crossing over, I think, all of the elements that we started with. And there's been some very interesting points of view. Our next meet will be January the 23rd, and the title is We've Embraced Tech, Have We Lost Community? And this will follow on from some of the conversations that we've been having today. So I hope you'll join us for that. And otherwise, I would like to thank everybody for coming along and partaking in what was a fantastic discussion. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
See
you.
all soon.
Thank you,
Cheers.
everyone.